Nardes, how's it
Good
going?
on you, Johan.
Good man, good.
Lekker. You've been busy this last while,
Yes,
right?
so yeah, no, been busy, been very busy, but it's been productive, so I can't complain. Just gotta keep keep focused.
Yeah, no, sure.
In yourself?
Yeah, no, actually, really busy. Yeah, with regards to a lot of with my trading and things like that, it's been quite busy. Yeah, but I'm also not complaining. It's better than doing nothing.
Yeah.
Yes. So
So
topic.
the topic of the
Yeah.
day:
So
dark side of spirituality.
yes. So we always talk about spiritual things, or we try to mostly talk about this because this is what the channel is about. But we've touched on this in the one magical episode. I think we still need to do part two, if I'm correct, at some point.
Right. We don't have a part two for that.
Yeah, but we did touch on this in terms of baneful magic. But to touch on the subject of the dark side of spirituality is interesting because there's a lot of factors that plays out with regards to the dark side, and the dark side is many times the light side, and it would be really cool to clear that out for some people, especially all these white magicians. You know, it'll be a fun topic to have. What do you think?
Let's go for it. It sounds awesome.
Why are you laughing?
No, because I'm thinking of the different categories of people that might be included under white magicians, and I yeah, it's I'm already thinking of some very interesting dynamics where people will assume that they are on one side of this equation when they may very well be on the other side.
Yes, yeah, because you get something like toxic positivity.
Yeah, yeah, you do.
So, um, yeah, so I don't know. You want to start? Should I start?
Well, yeah. So I now I can bat us off if you want. So the first thing I kind of have thought of, and because it's my background, the strongest in my background is sort of the charismatic, miracle-driven church,
Yeah,
where there's a lot of emphasis on things happening, which is better than an emphasis on nothing happening. I think, all things considered. However, there are many places where I think that movement has gone wrong, and I'll speak on the parts of the movement that I was a part of and give my opinion on and perspective on what happened
yeah,
there.
this will be interesting, man.
So
Something I've wondered
I was
about
kind of in the
a lot
like
of times. So sorry for interrupting you.
I was yeah. So I spent 2 years at the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. So Bethel Church in Redding, California. Many people in the charismatic and Protestant part of the church who are really into miracles and stuff know about the church at the very least. They kind of preached a God wants everybody to be healed message. This idea of God is good, and sort of period, end of story. There's no quote unquote bad. That's all relegated to the devil. And this sort of yeah. So let's just deal with those aspects because that's what I remember right off the top of my head that seemed relevant. So what they where I found kind of that there was potentially a problem with this sort of, you said, like toxic positivity, was what happens when someone doesn't get healed, right? So like we did see miracles, we did see people get healed, but a lot of people also didn't. Nothing happened. Like miraculous things would happen, sometimes nothing happened. Where is the sort of the balance and the understanding there? Because what ends up happening is there's a sort of disillusionment that begins to take place because you see that reality doesn't line up with the theology you're being taught. And some kind of cognitive dissonance is going to take place. Now, either you can suppress that and push that into the closet, which will drive you more and more into a sort of obsessive thing of trying to run away from that realization, which means you're going to go further and further into the light, attempting to ignore this darker truth you want to avoid, in a sense. And then what ends up happening is that this shadow becomes created because you're so far away from the middle that if you consciously travel away from the center point, then your subconscious is going to go the opposite direction because of the law of polarity and balance. So what happens is the darkness, quote unquote, becomes subconscious. And so what happens is things in the church start to become weird because people start manipulating each other. Leadership starts controlling. I had a conversation with my sister who studies psychology, and she wrote a literature review on how churches actually increase the likelihood of their congregation getting sexually abused because they're in an unarguable authority structure. So churches actually breed sexual abuse victims with their blocking stance on sex education, for example. So it's been unanimously shown that sex education decreases the number of teenage pregnancies, decreases the number of abortions, even decreases the number of sexual abuse cases. So what ends up happening is because of this purity culture, where therefore purity, we end up pushing sexuality into a closet, into a dark closet, and it becomes unconsciously driven. And now we have no control over it. Because the conscious and the subconscious are so bloody separated because one of them has gone too far into the bright light. And now this dark monster, starts to come out. And because so for example, Hillsong, I don't know, a lot of people have heard of Hillsong. They're like one of the most popular churches that have pumped out Christian
So just to
music.
interrupt you, I watched that series 2 weeks ago. Strangely that you're mentioning this, and it blew my mind. It literally blew my mind.
The whole Hillsong
Yeah,
thing?
there's a series about it. I don't know if you know of this.
No, I've just heard about the
I'll
articles.
share
I just
this
read
with
an
you. I'll
article
share
on
it with you later.
Okay.
Whoever hasn't watched this, watch it. It's crazy. It entertained me. It really entertained me. Anyway, yes.
But as I understand it, basically the original lead guy who started the whole thing was sexually abusing children. Yeah, basically is what it boils down to, and it was being covered up until after he.
Yeah, so his father. Yeah. The original. The guy who started the whole before Yulestong was actually existed. That guy, the dad of Yulestong's father, his dad, and it's a rough story, man. Yes, this guy touched so many lives, but not in the right way. It's quite dark, but
Yeah, but that's something that churches don't want to talk about.
yeah.
So churches don't.
Yes.
I have seen none of the big churches say anything about the Hillsong situation. It's been completely ignored, and Hillsong has been promoted to the nth degree. And the pastor who ran it was actively covering up his father's sexual abuse.
Yes, his name is Brian Armstrong. The guy who covered everything up, and his dad. I'll check later now. Let's just somehow check with.
And he's also but he's also the guy that's like responsible for Hillsong being this huge brand.
Yes, yeah, great. Yeah, so A Mega Church Exposed. This is the series name. It's a 2022 documentary. Okay, so check that out. A Mega Church. And then there's the story behind the secrets of Hillsong. Yeah, and then there was a lot of other things as well, man. One of the church leaders, he was like the main guy for the church. He committed. He had like a affair with his nanny, and dude, you must just watch it, man. It's crazy. It's insane. But that's exactly what you're talking about. It's and what he said as well. Now, this guy, after he got exposed, he came clean about everything, man. And he exposed that Brian Armstrong guy, and he went after a lot of people. And what he said as well is, it's so hard when you're in a situation like that, and everyone basically looks at you as God, to just hide your sexual wants and your earthly wants and keep on hiding that. At some point it actually explodes. And that's what he said. He was at a point where he wanted to do just only good, but something inside him said, no, this is not natural. Whatever you're doing here is not natural, and this is how it started. He used Adderall as well. That's how he preached. He preached on Adderall. So that's what I'm saying. Watch that series, dude, and then this guy. And while you're watching the series, you're not sure if this guy if he's acting, because he did exactly the same shit while he was preaching, like the whole crying, sobbing thing, hard stories, what. And then after he got caught out, it was the same thing. So then I asked myself, listen, is this guy actually really feeling remorse, or is he still on Adderall and he can't feel shit still? I don't know. Because I know what Ritalin and Adderall does. It's exactly the same as amphetamines or things you snort up your nose. Your emotions actually get numbed. That's basically what happens. So
yeah, it does. Actually, a lot of those brain sort of stimulatory things like Adderall actually numb you emotionally.
Yeah.
Many of those amphetamine stimulants are quite emotionally numbing, which, I mean, if somebody is emotionally distraught over something horrible happening, maybe that can bridge them for the moment so that they can actually get to work and maybe do something, And I'm not saying there isn't a place for it, but you can't use, if long-term use is going to result in emotional stuff.
And it's really wrong for if you look at a church scenario, because the other thing it does, it's a sexual stimulant. It's like cocaine, like anything you snort up your nose, it makes you horny as fuck. So I don't think it's the right place to be taking those type of stimulants, especially when you're the one and only person. Like that Brian Armstrong guy, he actually moved to the side, man, just for this guy to preach every Sunday and every day. So this is how powerful this guy was in the church. And I mean, he was on Adderall 24/7 and sleep deprivation. He slept like 3 hours a night. So, and it was also because of this Brian Armstrong dude. He pushed him into a corner and made him do a lot of work, man. Like this guy was overworked, underslept. It's like a corporate institution. It's not like a church anymore. But they explain everything there. It's mind blowing. It's like a business they're running. And then they get a lot of witnesses, people that went for the training or to the university, the Hillsong University, and some of those people, they were actually qualified university students with degrees and things before that. And they said when they got there and when they were finished, this was not a university course, but anyway, I have to do this to be able to go on this career path. So yeah, scary, man.
Wow.
So anyway, anyone that wants some fun, yes. It's a 4 episode. You'll have a lot of fun, and it's mind blowing. It's not funny.
No.
per se. There is things that's funny about it, but it's deep and
No,
dark.
but no, it's not. It's very, very dark. No, it's very dark. Um, and I guess that's honestly been mine. I've seen a lot of it, dude. Like I grew up in the church, and like it's. I've seen so much of it at this point that I barely have any hope that there's an institutional Christian solution. Like obviously some institution has to exist around things happening, but the let's say the current institutional model, the way that it is done is completely hopeless. Like a completely new model
Yeah,
needs to be figured
yeah. This
out
model is flawed.
because what happens because what invariably happens is that leadership positions in the church are given to psychopaths
Yeah,
and sociopaths because they're confident, they don't feel shame, they're really good at manipulating people, and churches are full of vulnerable people who are trying to be good.
yep.
And when your pastor tells you to do something, you do it. And what ends up happening, so I'm not sure if you ever heard of the book I Kissed Dating Goodbye, but this is a huge purity culture book back in the day when I was a kid.
No, what's the book's name? Say again.
I Kissed Dating
Oh no.
Goodbye. The author has since come out and said, I made a big mistake. I should never have written that book. And I'm so sorry for the damage I've caused. He's also divorced now. So it's the problem with this with the whole purity culture that Christianity has going on is that what it ends up doing is it pushes something into the darkness, something away from the light, away from consciousness, and it goes in there and it becomes part of the shadow. And then the more vigorously you try to ascend towards the light and run away from the darkness, the more that your shadow and subconscious descends further and further into darkness, and you become more and more perverse. There's nothing more perverted than the mind of a Christian.
Oh, also, if you look at the Catholic churches, I mean, that's where all these bad things happen to children. It's because of
But
that
it's
suppression.
but the numbers are actually basically equal between non-Catholic churches and Catholic churches on sexual abuse. That's the interesting thing.
Yeah,
Is we used to think it was
yeah, I
just in the
know.
Catholic Church, but the numbers are actually about the
But
same.
both are doing suppression. It's
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
yeah, you can't have a car driving without an exhaust. Somewhere something needs to be let out as well. And I'm not saying people need to be allowed to do that bad shit, but if they stop going into the illusion where everything just needs to keep on being good, then there can actually be a flow between good and bad, a up tide and a low tide and a high tide, and things can actually balance out. Whereas if you only have that high tide, at some point there's going to be a crash, and yeah, that crash allows for certain things to surface, and that if they were not dealt with in a timely manner, meaning during a span of time, if it all happens in one shot, there's going to be some screws are going to come loose, and I think that's where those dangers come in. That's just how I visualize it. That's how I see it.
That's a good
If
one.
it's not naturally laid out in a timely manner, no.
Yeah, yeah. And Jung said that he had criticism for the Buddhists too, but he criticized all the different religions, but where it was worth criticizing. He said the problem is the Christians put their Bibles between themselves and their unconscious, and the inner spiritual work that one must do. What do you think happened to Jesus in the desert exactly?
Yeah, when
Like, what do you think he was just like? Do you think he was just like in a glorious bliss
yeah,
the
he
whole
went
time?
went there up to the mountain. He just sat at a specific place. Same for Buddha, right? They were distraught. They were sad about the people, about the state of the world, about all these lies, about everything that's happening in the world. They went and sat on a rock, and Buddha under a tree, and suddenly the light just came showering down on them, and everything was fine again within their heads and in their minds and in their bodies. No, it's not how it works. It's it's not. You, if you think logically about it, there's no way that can work out. So you can think the amount of suffering that Jesus needed to go through before he came back and actually could do the real teachings and miracles and those type of things. He needed to go through something. Same for Buddha. Same for you. Same for me. And I'm not comparing myself to those people. They are. I mean, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. You can't. So, but we're striving towards that. And I know, me personally, I needed to suffer a lot to get to where I am today. And the same for you. That's the only way you advance spiritually, and that's the reason 98% of society doesn't want to do it, because subconsciously they know, when I want to advance, I have to feel pain. So let's rather just keep on using drugs, smoking, drinking, working till I drop, getting children, a wife, and just living it out like the rest, so that I don't have to think about what is important actually in the long run. And I'm not talking down to anyone living a normal life. I'm just saying that's the easy path. That is not the path that certain individuals take, and those certain individuals are willing to go through pain and a shitload of it. Doesn't maybe look at it at some point, but if you really look dark enough, or you could actually experience what they've experienced up to that point, there's a lot of pain involved with not doing this, with not walking the same road as the rest, in terms of relationships, in terms of human relations, in terms of, yeah, there's so many things that actually has a negative impact. So if you have a spiritual path, if you're on the spiritual path, it's all good and well. Yes, at some point you get your stillness and your quietness, and you can think a lot further than the normal folk. But also on the other side, it has, exactly as you said earlier, the polarity of the dark side. That person needed to go through certain things that people don't want to go through. So, as I said, an uptide and a low tide. And if you prefer to have only the uptide, great, but the uptide will only be a minuscule amount of what it's actually supposed to be, because you'll never get the full experience of it. You'll never get the full presence of life. You'll never be fully alive. So there's things you're offering up as well to be normal.
Yeah. No.
So it's each to their own, and that's why I'm saying I'm not talking down to anyone. Every person has their choice how they want to live their life. I'm just saying, ideally, if you want to, at the end of the day, connect to who you are, and that I still don't know up to this date. Do what you want, that I'm still not doing currently right now, 100%. Be where I want to be. I'm still not doing that currently 100%. But at some point I'll get there, because I'm not scared of going into the dark crevices of my mind. And for that reason, I would find the gold. Doesn't matter if I'm 50, 60, 70, or maybe I die before it. But for me personally, I know I at least attempted it up to my fullest ability to actually get to the point where I wanted to get. And that's, for me, my first and only priority in the long run is spiritual transformation. And it's not every person that wants to do that. It's And same for you as well. I'm speaking now on your behalf, but I know you quite well. I think for you as well, Johan, that's basically what our channel's name is about. It's to do with alchemy. Alchemy is an alchemical process of changing yourself and getting closer to yourself. But the self that you want to get closer to is the Christ in you. It's not related to something externally. It's that inner stillness, or that this it's so hard for me to define it.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people don't really always understand initially about the spiritual path. Is that, like most paths that you take through life, basically the amount of discomfort that you're willing to go through is how far you get.
Yeah, true.
Like, it's when you see somebody who's a spiritual, what you could have said, a spiritual master, guru, whatever you want to call them, they're the people who have been through the most pain,
Yes.
and they haven't blocked it out. Because if you block the pain, you're not feeling the pain, you're not going through the pain. It's piling up at your back door, maybe, right? But you haven't gone through it yet. And it there's a discomfort associated with not with it piling up at the back door. But that discomfort is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the discomfort and suffering that comes from ignoring pain, because that's I would say that's a sort of a pointless kind of pain that you create for yourself when you ignore the pain, that the things that you need to be going through, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's it's not actually pain, I think, even because there's a numbing agent used there somewhere. Either if it's alcohol, pills, people, work,
People, sex,
sex, those type of things, whatever other drug.
praise and worship.
Yeah, praise and worship. There we go. You're right. So that's not actual. A pain is something whereas you are alone with it.
Yeah.
You can't blame it on anyone. You can't throw it onto someone, on anyone. You can't. It's something. Even though things were done to you, this is now your responsibility to go through it and resolve it. Even like blaming and shaming and those type of things, it's not taking responsibility for your pain. And and most people still do that. Sometimes I blame things for my pain, but I don't do it for a long while. Then I embrace it again and realize, oh my word, yeah, this is where I was wrong. This is where I allowed it. The choices I've made actually brought me to that point. Sometimes it's not even because of my choices, but it's still my choice to take responsibility for it. Because if I don't take responsibility for that pain, who's going to resolve it for me? No one can. Even though my mom probably wants to resolve the pain for me, she can't. So very important what you said earlier with regards to, you mentioned something, and then I thought about this. There was a story about Nietzsche, about this monk. He wasn't a monk, he was like a saint, and he taught a lot of people very deep things. And when he had a lot of followers as well. And when he was done, he said he needed to go into his own journey now and go deeper. And he wants his followers to start hating him. I think he used the word hate. To start hating him for the things he taught them. And firstly for them to inquire it and hate him maybe for the things he taught them. And that was very interesting for me, because basically what that is Nietzsche talked about this as well. You get the and this is one of the dark sides of spirituality, when you are either a believer, which is the dark side, okay, or you are an inquirer, which is the side that actually grows you and evolves you as a human being. So if you are on the believing side, it means you stopped questioning. Now,
Yep.
if you stop questioning, you stop growing. So, isn't that also like dark, like black magic? It's like stagnation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was I checked where was it, on some kind of story. It was a story about this farmer, but he was very wise, and he had this guy that wanted to learn everything about spirituality. So he traveled the world, and at some point, after all the things he learned, he was like, okay, I can't get any further. So he gave up and went and worked on a farm. And the same thing there with what I'm telling you now. This farmer, they were teaching each other a lot of things, and they were learning so much from each other. And then this guy, he said, okay, I am becoming a believer again. And he started following and believing in this farmer again, because this farmer was really wise. He had a lot of life experience. So they were teaching each other. But at that point, this guy actually just started agreeing with the farmer, and he just kept on agreeing. And then up to one morning where the farmer woke up and said to him, hey, my guy, sorry, you gotta go, man. And the guy was like, why do I need to go now? We're doing so well. I mean, the farmer said, no, we're not doing well anymore. At some point, you started believing everything I said and just agreeing. And at this current point in our relationship, there's no growth for me, but also no growth for you. Because at this point in time now, you will, because you're not inquiring anymore, you will believe everything I say. And when a big catastrophe comes, you will not be able to find your way out because you were relying on me, and it would be my fault. And that is why I need to let you go. I don't know where I heard the story, but it came up immediately in my head now. So,
That's awesome. That's awesome. No, it portrays it portrays an interesting, an important point, which is that God is not afraid of your questions. You're afraid of asking them. Let's be very clear about that. Because the reason that most people choose quote unquote faith, which really it's in some subtle way it's a cheap excuse for real faith, but
yeah, because it has a limit,
real
right?
faith is because real faith is going into the darkness and trusting that God is there.
Yes.
Like real faith is going into the place of such excruciating pain that you think you're going to die. It's going to dissolve you and wipe you out completely, and having the faith that you'll survive. This is real faith, and that makes you that type of faith makes you not, the word's not immortal, but completely unafraid of death.
So it is
Because
immortal, right?
That's the real, and that's the real faith, is that you stop becoming afraid of death because you're no longer afraid of pain. Because you realize that you can and do survive everything.
Yeah.
But that's a deeper kind of faith that only comes from being willing to ask questions. I've literally had a conversation with a pastor where he admitted to me that he doesn't ask questions because he's afraid of the answers. He was one of the first pastors that was honest enough, which I really am grateful for, and therefore would never use his name because I don't want to shame somebody who is honest. But he admitted to me when I told him that I'd gone on this journey of asking questions and being like, God, I want to know the answers. I'm willing. I will walk the road required to know the answers, and I did. But he was honest enough to admit to me, like, I'm afraid of the answers. I would rather just believe. I'd rather just trust God. I can't. It's too much for me.
Yeah, because
And
it's still a form of
and
safety. Yeah,
it's still, you're still trying to play it safe. You're trying to be inside the comfort zone, inside the walls of security.
yeah,
And if you truly want to walk the spiritual path, then you have to go beyond that. You have to go beyond the realms of safety. You have to go into the dark places and trust that God's there. And you have to go into the darkness to the point where you can't see anymore, because otherwise your eyes never adjust,
yes,
and you never learn to peer into the darkness. Your eyes never learn to, you never learn to see into the darkness of yourself. And only the person that, like where Jesus was sort of tempted, right, by the devil. We sort of talk about those things. Those temptations didn't happen in a state of spiritual euphoria. That happened in the bottom of a pit. That temptation happened at the bottom of a very, very dark pit of despair and pain and suffering. And if you have any illusion that that's not the case, and you're going to completely misunderstand what happens here. Like, it was 40 days of suffering. It was 40 days and nights of pure suffering.
yes.
I've watched somebody do a 40-day fast. It is brutal. It is brutal. And this dude did it in the comfort of suburbia. Jesus did this in the desert. like we are talking about suffering that most people don't even know can be had by a human being, because most people are so comfortable. Right? We're talking about such pain and thirst and hunger and desperation where most people will only ever feel this if they hold their breath for long enough. That desperation to breathe, that we get from the Wim Hof practices and going into the cold and holding your breath and these challenging things. Most people, that's starting to help you understand the level of suffering that man went through in order to access his real power. And it very clearly states in the Bible that when he came out of the desert, he came out in spirit and in power. And he only started manifesting power after having gone into a dark place for 40 days and 40 nights. Like, only after having gone into the utmost suffering and pain and torment was he able to actually become truly manifest
Yeah,
who he truly
but there's
is.
so many examples of
So
this. Yes.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. So at least for the Christians, I think it's because they're not going to relate to Buddha very well. A Buddhist will, but to the Christians, like, look, this is what Jesus had to do to access his full power. That's how he began to manifest. So if you believe in miracles and you want to see these things, you need to be willing to walk into the darkest place, say no to the devil, so to speak, right? Walk right up into his kingdom, right up to his throne, and say no, thank you, and walk back. that's sort of you've got to walk all the way into the pit of darkness, right into the throne room of the devil, kiss him on the forehead and go, I appreciate what you do, but I'm not falling for your tricks. And then come back and stand in the middle place, and then you have real power.
Definitely. So there's many religions, especially as you said now, even with Jesus, we can see that prime example, and that's the one I always look at. But if you look at even the Tibetan Book of the Dead, I don't know if you've ever read that, or the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
I read the Tibetan book.
And basically, it's to make peace with death. Because if you haven't made peace with death, which is your biggest fear, if you don't know this, in life, currently you at this moment, the biggest fear you have is the fear of death. Now, if you have the fear of death, that is stopping you from doing things you actually should be doing. Because there's a defense mechanism built in within you that gives you certain emotions or feelings or warnings to not do the things, because yes, that will take you into dark spaces, and that can be the end of your ego. And for your body, the end of your ego is also the end of you. For your conscious mind as well, for For the self-made self, the moment that self does not exist anymore, say for example, let's use the example where we've taken psychedelics and went on heroic trips. And for people that don't know what's a heroic trip, go read up on it. But it's using a lot of psychedelics, whereas at some point your sense of self does not exist anymore, and you don't know who you knew, you don't know where you are, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know. Everything is so. Yes, everything is brand new. That point, that is the biggest fear you have, because if you can do that, how can I say it? So if you go into that place where you can actually disassociate from self, you can actually, that's basically where you can find the truths that you've always been looking for. But that's why most people won't be finding the truths that they've always been looking for. Even with Jesus going onto the mountain, let's use that example again. Like he was on the brink of death. That's why he could live fully. And even and that's still built into us as humans, man. Like even him that went through that, at the end of the day, when Jesus knew he's going to be crucified, he still asked God to not let this rain upon him.
Yeah.
We still have that, even though you've been so deep, we still have that innate fear of death. So to live fully, and it's exactly what you said, and this is why I'm using this example, to be able to live fully, you need to be able to be make peace with death. And to make peace with death is to let everything die that you've attached to yourself that is actually not you, because that's the root of all suffering as well. It's believing, it's doing things that's not you. It's believing things that are not you. So yeah.
Wow, that's a deep insight, man. That's a deep insight. Is that true suffering is caused by acting in ways and believing things about yourself that are not true,
Yes.
that are not cohesive with your authenticity. Wow.
So yeah, but it's a lot easier to say it and then to do it on a permanent basis. We all of us know this.
Yeah.
All of us know this actually on a deep level, but we're not willing to look at it. Because if you remove the things that you thought you were, what are you then? You are deaf. You are your biggest fear. You are the thing that does not make sense, where it does not have to make sense. Like with you, I'm going to use psychedelics again, and we can use this as a prime example. There was a certain point where, with a lot of psychedelics, you went to a place where you felt excruciating pain and fear, and you dying at that moment. But right after that, you felt as if you were in heaven.
Yeah. I can tell you about that. Sure. It was.
It's on the brink of that, where you push it to the worst, you can only have the best. But if you're not willing to push it to the worst, you can't have the best.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was 5 grams, but it was a Mexican blues, a very very potent genetic. I I actually did it with my brother. Other people were also on stuff, but not nearly as much. We took an enormous dose. It started off with me just violently shaking on the floor. Well, not violently shaking, but like almost convulsing on the floor. Because it was so intense. It was like being in a space shuttle and taking off at an incredible speed. It just felt like the walls were gonna like dissolve, and it was wild, dude. And then it kept going. It got more intense, more intense, more intense, more intense, and then it breaks through, and the pain and all everything is just gone. and it was just like, it was like being sounds funny, but it was like being born again. Like,
Yes.
I was genuinely in the mind of an infant. Like, I had no, I could, I couldn't remember. Like, I could remember things like how to roll a smoke, right? But I couldn't remember, for example, where bricks came from, or even where people came from. I realized soon enough, because I rolled a smoke and I went and sat outside, and it was like I looked at the bride pit and I was like, where did that come from? And then I looked around and I'm like, where do people come from? And then there was like, there was no memory, there was barely an identity. Like, I couldn't really even remember my name, to be entirely honest, for that first little while. And I experienced, naked consciousness without any ego, without any, and then what happened was I started feeling these impulses that were underneath, like the rivers and the currents that drive our lives, the genetic influences, the emotional currents. Like, for example, I knew in that moment that I wanted to have children. It was very clear to me. I didn't even know what it meant to make a human being, but somehow I knew I wanted to do that, even though I didn't fully understand what that is at all in that moment, as a grown adult. And but there's something very, very valuable about that, because what happens is that you practice dying.
It is, yeah.
And you get really good at dying. If you practice dying, you it becomes less and less of a shaky, freak out thing, because basically my body was reacting as if it felt like I was dying. Right? It was basically trying to shake me and prevent me from falling into a death, right? Like into a death coma or something, because it was afraid. And you have to keep going through that until you've deconditioned the fear out of your cells. Because it's like, even Jesus, at the moment where he was like, oh, I'm going to the cross, he was like, well, if it's possible, rather take this from me. Because the fear response is still in our cells almost. And the work is to repeatedly go into the fear of death, essentially, which is what we're doing every time we do a cold shower, every time we do one of these things, these practices we do that push us to our point of fear, the breath work, because there's this moment of disillusionment of consciousness that occurs.
Yeah.
When we do these things, what we're really doing is we're practicing to die. And the Tibetans really understood this. Like, their whole shtick was practice to die. And I'm starting to understand it now, finally, why that was what they focused on so much, to almost a morbid extent. But it's important, because we want to decondition that fear response, because that innate fear response is actually what keeps us back from spiritual progress. It's what makes us afraid to change, to grow, to become capable of doing more good. Like, if your goal is to do good, you want good things to happen around you, you want to manifest good things, you want to be a part of that, which is what most people are seeking, then you have to disinhibit your fear of death, in a sense. You have to consciously go into your fear of death and conquer that, so that you are disinhibited to do the right thing and not be governed by fear and controlled by it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So if we evade, evasion is. So if you're talking about fear, so let's take it back to the dark side of spirituality again. So if you are doing anything to evade fear, you are doing black magic. Is that what you're saying?
I suppose I am, yes.
So if you are doing any action to pull yourself closer to love, you are doing I don't like the word white magic and black magic, but we're just using it here for the purposes for understanding. But you are doing in actual fact white magic, because your means, your actions would be in the actions of love, towards love. The results of those actions in the future would also be loving. Whereas if it's to evade fear, your end result will be more fear. And while you are
Yes,
pushing
actually.
away, there's no growth with pushing away. But yeah, it's tricky. Even if you, because in certain things you use it, and you can use it as a motivator, like that. Yeah, this is tricky. Like that example where they used the cat, where they used a mouse and they put a piece of cheese in front of it, whereas the mouse is running towards the cheese at a certain speed, and then the mouse is running on a treadmill. And then they put a cat behind the mouse on a treadmill, and the mouse is actually running faster than what it did by just only chasing the cheese. So I don't know. This is something to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a good point there. There's a good point there, right? I suppose it's the problem with unconsciously running away from something is you might be running away from something you should be running
There's
towards.
the key, I think, Yuan. Thanks. I think it's unconsciously running away from something that is the enemy.
Yeah, it's because if you if you
Right.
identify
Yes.
some aspect that's in the darkness of yourself, maybe, but you're like, no, I should be running away from that. You're going to be running in the wrong direction. When you should be running towards it so that you can embrace it and bring it back into the family. You know, it's what's that? Where it talks about Jesus says he the parable of the lost sheep, right? And he says like, well, I leave the 99 to go find the missing one,
Yeah.
right? So if that's Jesus's attitude about human beings, then that should be our own attitude about the parts of ourselves that are left in darkness and in the unconscious, the parts of ourselves we don't know yet.
Definitely. Yeah.
You know, if
So
I'm
true.
saying we need to go leave the 99 that we've achieved consciousness with, that they are in the herd, let's say, and bring the parts of ourselves that are still in the fringes into the family.
Yeah. Yeah, because if we're talking about that level, it is a form of evasion, of evading that dark parts of yourself. And why we're evading that is because of fear. And normally it's done
Yeah.
unconsciously. If
Yes.
we're doing it consciously, we just make a choice not to choose that action because it's not going to be most beneficial in the current situation. That's a different story. That's basically the example of the mouse and the cat. But if it's unconscious,
Yeah, and I think yeah, and like if you consciously are like I like when you let's say you look at an example that you don't like, let's say, right? Let's say for us, we look at the way that certain spiritual leaders have maybe acted that we've seen that are bad examples maybe. Look at Hillsong. If we consciously avoid ending up like that, that's probably a good thing. Yeah, because it's probably going to help us move towards a direction of more honesty, less suppression, less self-deception, less trying to play an image, right? But if you're just unconsciously running away from your sexuality and your the sexual nature of being a human being, then you will actually end up at Hillsong.
yeah,
Ironically enough, you'll end up there because that's how they got there. So if you want to run away from those bad examples, you need to consciously do it, which means you need to understand what they did wrong.
yeah,
Which I have yet to hear much of the church respond in a way that indicates that they know what went wrong. Like whenever I hear Christians talk about fallen leaders, it never admits the real problems. It's never conscious. It's always, people are sinful, or some kind of like some kind of easy, quick solution to the deeper investigation that's required if you really want to be free of that perversion, let's say.
Yeah.
People are just too, and people are afraid, and it's because they in general allow fear to govern them, the fear of death in its ultimate form. All fear is really the fear of death. People allow that to govern them to such an extent that when it comes to spiritual and moral matters, they end up yielding to that fear regardless.
Yeah.
Regardless of their moral stance, regardless of their what they say they believe, none of that really matters at the end of the day if fear can control you.
Yeah, and let's make it clear, fear is running this whole world. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's definitely not love, because then you would have seen the results of love, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we said, so firstly, so we're just calling that out. So unawareness is part of the dark side of spirituality, obviously. But you get so many spiritual people that are walking around unaware. Okay. Spiritual people. And we said external evasion. So evading things, as we said now, even with in terms of fear or the fear of death, we'll use external evasion. So meaning we'll get our focus externally instead of looking internally. Whereas spirituality is only the internal looking, it's not the external looking, basically. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. And the kingdom of God is where? Within you. So that's all in the Bible. It's not me saying that. So external evasion, and that's by use of alcohol, churches, reaffirming that you're a good person, and that's a very dangerous one. Keep on reaffirming that you're a really good person, because that's normally the ones that has done the most damage in this world. I mean, Charles Manson believed he was a good person. Yeah, so did that make him a good person? No, it was his belief. His belief gave him the right to do the things he did. Many serial killers do not believe they believe they're doing a act for humanity, a good act for humanity in the long term, in the long run. I mean, if you look at Hitler, what was his motivation? Like he believed he was doing something good, otherwise he wouldn't have done it, is it not? If he believed he was doing something bad,
No, I mean, it was and there you go, right? So Hitler is a nice example because everyone likes to use him. Even though, like, if we look at modern day mass murderers, he has a good body count, but he's not even close to number one or number two. That's Stalin and Mao, by the way.
Yeah.
Those two have they were much more effective at wiping out humanity. But Hitler, for example, he didn't get into art school. He wanted to become an artist. It would appear from the history records, something to that effect. And at some point, he took offense towards Jewish people, and he was like, "This is the problem, clearly, right? I couldn't cut it in the art world, so therefore it's somebody else's fault." Or something.
And again, it's an external evasion, right, of your own problems that's happening internally.
Exactly. Instead of turning inwards, well, maybe I don't need art school to be the artist I want to be. Maybe it's a good thing that I don't become indoctrinated with their ways of viewing art. I need to create a new art form, and he could have become an artist that actually revolutionized art as opposed to a mass murderer. It sounds funny that those two things is like either you become a great artist or a mass murderer, but that is the potential. That is the polar potential of reality, right? And if you choose to go through, and most people don't realize that they unconsciously go in Hitler's direction, because what happened to most of Germany when he started doing his thing? Like, what's funny about him is that he was like, he just kind of, like, if you look at his very early speeches, they weren't as successful. And basically what he did was he tailored his speeches to include more and more of what made the crowd cheer and less of what made the crowd
Like
boo.
a comedian.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So all he was doing was really trying to play to what made people cheer for him. Right? He was just a populist in a sense. And many, unfortunately, people that call themselves spiritual leaders and pretend to be spiritual leaders are populists.
Yeah.
They say whatever gets a congregation to say amen.
Yeah, and it's normally a lot of generalization. A lot.
And so yeah, it's avoiding nuance will get you a cheer. Avoiding the gray spaces where we need to make careful decisions about things and not just view things in blanket terms with specification and deeper understanding. That is completely left on the table because you're just looking for,
Yeah.
right? And eventually what the communist leaders figured out is all they have to do is have a little signboard that says applause and kill anyone who doesn't applaud them when they speak, and then they can say whatever they want and still get applause. But speaking about you, Stalin, so
Yeah, it's like,
what he would literally have applause go on for like 15-20 minutes because everyone was afraid to stop.
yeah, you don't want to be that first guy.
So you don't want to be the guy who doesn't go along with what your brothers and sisters are doing, right? So we have to be careful when we talk about it because often walking the spiritual path can mean walking against what a whole community might be doing.
That's most of the
Like,
time
the
that is the spiritual
spiritual
path. It's against the norm. Yes.
It means walking against the norm because most people, unfortunately, at this stage in where humanity is in consciousness, are still completely ruled by fear. Like, the average place is not, we're not even close to the average overcoming fear. What is that? That's not. We're not at a place yet where humanity has come to a point where the average person is close to overcoming the fear of death. Like that's we're not there yet at all. And so when you walk the spiritual path, it's going to mean that you're going to be the person who's not going along with the Nazi regime. You're the one who's not going along with Stalin and Mao's plans. And like that's not an easy place to be. Like
Because you got society police. Like if you look, just a simple example, the COVID thing, like you literally had COVID police which were civilians. It just happens. It happens naturally because there's this massive amount of people, and then there's a few that's different. And those few that's different, they're obviously not fitting in, and people will call you out because you're not part of the system. What the fuck's going on here? What are you doing here, bro? That's why most people just kept their mouths shut.
Yeah. Because
it split up families, it split up loved ones, relationships, husbands and wives. Was quite severe, man. Like the people you thought won't call you out. I mean, I had people that came to me and said, listen, just a simple example, if you're not going to get the injection, you can't come close to my kids. So I literally...
That's horrendous and ridiculous at the same time.
I had people that came out and said that to me, dude. Like, and that's how it works. It's they become the enforcers because of unconsciousness.
Yeah.
They just repeating what the media is telling them without them knowing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what happens is that before you know it, you are the guard at the Nazi concentration camp.
Yes, and I mean that guards say that, man.
and that's what they said when the many of the gods were interviewed. It's like you wake up the next morning and you're like, oh my god, where have I ended up? Because what happens is you say yes to a small little diversion from what you know is true and right, a diversion from your spiritual path, let's say, because it's more convenient. I'm a little bit afraid. I'm actually scared of being rejected, or I don't want to look bad in this situation. And slide, and the next thing you know, you're the one like sending
Yes.
them into a
And
shower.
you're thinking
And
you're
it's
right
like,
for doing that. Your belief have
yeah.
shifted. Same with if you look at gangs.
And even if you realize you're wrong, what do you do now?
Yeah, you're in quite deep, man. And then that's where the fear of death becomes strong again. Like with gangs as well.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna join this, but I'd never kill someone. And then a year later, that guy finds himself as an assassin. Like, it's because the norm has shifted. Your norm has shifted. The story you've told yourself has shifted, and your beliefs have shifted. And that's also, again, not being rooted internally. It's rooted externally, because it's about what they would say and do. And this has caused me so much damage in my life, man. I can really speak about this shit. And I'm sure you as well. I don't know. But I can speak about, I think we all can. It's just if you realize it and make changes to it. But we all can talk about how society has screwed you over in certain things. Even with me starting smoking, man. A simple example, but I started smoking to be, the friends I was hanging around with. I don't think we would have kept on being friends if I didn't light up that cigarette that day with him. And if I was the guy that said, no, guys, listen, I'm not going to smoke today. I'm not going to do this. My mom said I shouldn't smoke. So no, man, I wouldn't have been part of that culture, and I wouldn't have stayed in that friends group. It's simple stuff, but it's again externally focused. And yeah, crazy, man. This is actually such a broad topic, bro. So, but the dark side of spirituality is, I think the biggest part, or the biggest danger of this, is actually being getting confused with what's happening outside and what's happening inside. Because everything outside automatically manifests if you can get this clean and quiet. But if you're trying to control that, it's not gonna make this clean and quiet. It works the other way around. So that's why Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," and seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all will be added unto you. It's firstly, go internally, get all your shit together, work through your dark spaces and crevices, fight those demons, look Satan in the eye and say, now I understand you, and I know if I make the choices and the things you're trying to fool me with, the ideas and fear-based impulses, regret, hate, anger, if you follow that, the results will always be catastrophic, and it will not give me good results in the long run. So if you can learn that all internally and then incorporate that shadow self, and then your external manifestations should also then start to come together.
Yeah, I mean, there's yes, but Jesus still went to the cross. So it's not that your external manifestations are going to be maybe not, you might not live in luxury, but there will be the external manifestation of the righteousness that you found within, right? Seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness. And so, in other words, the right standing or the right way in order to orientate yourself. And since that is within, if you orientate yourself correctly within, then without, things start to fall into place. And for example, we see that even Jesus going through an experience like the cross, he goes, then there's a resurrection, because he was in right standing internally. That even the attempt to end his physical manifestation, he was able to supersede by having gone deeper and further than they could have possibly understood, right?
Yeah.
And we see the same thing with someone like the Apostle John, who is arguably probably the most profound of Jesus's disciples and had the deepest relationship with him. And he was unkillable because he had reached such an internal state. And we've seen this in history. There are a number of saints who've been so internally, have gone so far internally with the kingdom of heaven that externally their physical bodies have been so deconditioned from the fear of death that they just fail to die when they're supposed to.
Yeah, because everything is left over to the big controller, the one that actually decides, and not humanity anymore, because that fear doesn't affect you anymore. So meaning your faith is actually truthful and pure, meaning the things that would normally touch other people, like sickness, death, that type of things that are not real in the long run of immortality, can't touch you now because you're already functioning in that spirit. You're already fully functioning in Christ's spirit. So if you die, did you actually die? Now, by you functioning on that level and you knowing that, it's not going to make a difference if you physically die. You're still here. And they know it. So because of them knowing it, nothing can literally touch them in the physical realm as well. I think. I don't know. I've never been there.
Yeah.
But that's how I've summed it up in my head so far, with the amount of knowledge I have up to this point.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. It's like only the people who've actually gone in and had these deep experiences are the ones who are become the external world. They become immune to things that other people are governed by. The rhythms of time, the ebb and flow of political power, the shifting of social status, and all these things. This becomes less and less effective on them, to the point where eventually they supersede that to such an extent where people, the only conclusion that the Roman Empire had to deal with him, the Apostle John that is to put him on a ship and put him on an island to get him away from everyone, because they were afraid of what he might say to people and the influence and effect that he had on people around him, that they were like, just stick him on an island so we don't have to deal with him.
And John, he believed that they can't do anything to him. Remember that, eh? Now, your point earlier with Jesus, he believed he's going to be crucified. So that is the strength of my belief. My faith will make it so. So with them, the amount of belief these guys had, like they manifested anything instantaneously. The amount of faith they had, there was no doubts because there was no fear.
Yeah, because they'd worked through it. They'd gone into
or I think the fear was still there, but the fear of eternal death is gone. I think that's it. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Because, look, to an extent, the body is always going to want to preserve itself as a because it's designed to do that. The body's designed to keep itself going. So. And in many instances, it will do that even when we try to prevent that from happening. The body is very insistent on survival. But I think if you put spiritually past that point, at a certain point, the body becomes deconditioned from that internal fear. And I think that's where people achieve, like, basically. Where their physical bodies become like an object that they can control, to the point where, like, they might be able to just instantaneously vanish at a single point and reappear somewhere else, possibly in a different period in time as well. Like they become completely, the physical body becomes nothing more than a UFO ship that they can fly around the universe.
The impossibility becomes impossible.
Yeah, it's like at that point the body is barely even necessary at that point, because you become so advanced in your development that you've outgrown almost the need for a body, and at that last stage you achieve what humans kind of refer to as the Ubermensch or the Superman or the super spiritual, the Super Saiyan, whatever.
The Ubermensch, was that also not Nietzsche, ne?
That was Nietzsche, yes.
Okay.
And then,
Ubermensch, I forgot about that.
Like Hitler was one of those art school students that read the synopsis of the book and just grabbed an idea from it and ran, because he used Ubermensch, and he was his thought on that was then it's the Aryan people. Which is funny because he didn't even have blue eyes or blonde hair, but for some reason he was obsessed with that image, and whatever, but he then associated that he was sort of trying to make a superhuman race by force, which is of Nietzsche, indicates that he was the guy who read the synopsis of the book, not the actual book, which means he was one of those lazy art students.
Yeah.
But that is a possibility, and perhaps that's what he was initially trying to get to, but everything became extremely dark when he was unwilling to make the personal sacrifice required to reach that, and that's what happens anytime that because as I shared in my testimony, I think episode 6, we had a vision of nuclear apocalypse versus like abundance, right? And there was this thing of like, you're capable of producing both outcomes, and I think that's a reality that's very true for all of us. Like when you choose to go down the path of saying yes to your fear, walking further and further down a path of giving over your belief and not questioning things anymore, not questioning your teachers, not questioning your government, not questioning the when you give over that to other people, you will be taken to a very, very dark place because you refused to walk into the darkness. So because like darkness will come regardless, I think is sort of the lesson here. It's like you either going to voluntarily walk into hell and walk right up to the devil's throne, or you're going to be dragged there kicking and screaming. But the problem with being dragged there is that you're going to cause untold devastation along the way.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not only that's not going to only fall on your shoulders, it's going to fall on a lot of other people's shoulders. And I don't think that's the right way of doing it. Yeah.
And so it's like, we're all quote unquote going to hell. I mean, in the story, it says he descended into the depths for 3 days before, or a certain time before he ascended again.
Yeah.
So it's like darkness has its due. You don't avoid walking through hell. That's just, you just don't get to do that. If you try, you will be dragged, but you will cause yourself and everybody around you harm, and could result in the death of a lot of people, actually. Because it's happened before. This happens over and over again. So it's what we're talking about is like maybe seems a little hippy dippy for some people, but when you realize that this is the difference between genocide and paradise, it kind of starts to matter.
Yeah. Like how do we evolve as a species? Like we had this topic last week. As we spoke about this last week as well, like how do we progress otherwise than if pain is not involved? Like there's no logical way of doing that. You can't progress with being a pure loving fairy all day and just swiping your wand to the left and to the right and just things get right. As I don't know, man, like yeah, I think positivity has its place and time. In certain places there's no way that you can use positivity to actually grow. It's the negativity that moves you forward. It's knowing you do not want to be able to get what you want. Like if you want to ask yourself, what do I want? And I don't know, maybe someone here listening has also tried this exercise. You go and sit down and ask yourself, what do you really want? You'll see there's a lot of things, and most of them are externally linked. But why not ask yourself, what do I not want? And then look at the opposite of that, because that's probably what you want.
Yeah.
And it's again by looking at the devil or the dark or the bad side or the thing you're not willing to look at, that gives you the rewards in the long run of where you should be going and where you actually want to be going, instead of listening to what people telling you of where you want to be going, because that's not going to help you. Just ask me. I've been in a occupation that I've hated from when I've left school up until now, not a while back, like doing the exact thing that made me sick. It pushed me towards drinking, to drugs, to I was doing exactly what I didn't want because I didn't know what I wanted, and I never asked myself, what don't I want? So yeah, like we can't move without the bad. And when I'm saying the bad, is not doing bad. It's not going around and molesting kids or things like that, and suddenly you're going to become Jesus. Please do not misunderstand us. That's not what we're saying here.
Don't use us as an excuse for your
Yeah. So like, but definitely, if you want to evolve as a human being, then you need to look at the things that bother you and see how that reflects back at yourself and your own personality and things that you're actually hiding. And it's very easy. Look at what bothers you externally, because there's something of that external reality has actually started internally within you. I had a friend, just a simple example. I'm not going to mention his name. Maybe he watches this video at some point. But it's like, dude, I laughed so hard. So, and I love him dearly, man. He's full on. He's full on Christian, man. Like, he's a good person. He's really is a good person, but he's not willing sometimes to look further than, he's not willing to do that. And it's because he's a full-on believer, which I don't blame him for, but I can use this example and people can work it out themselves. So I was telling him about extraterrestrial experience I had, and he's like, yeah. So did you really see them, bro? I'm like, yeah, I actually took videos and stuff, dude. Like, it was crazy. It was insane, man. And how they like telepathically communicated to me, and I was, yeah, and he sounded very interested. And I think it was like 3 weeks later, we spoke again, and he's like, hey, dude, listen, what the fuck happened? But I think I saw like an alien, man. Like you explained, after you explained that stuff to me, there was one night I was looking at the stars, and I was just looking up and asking questions and stuff. And suddenly this light came, and it was like a communication between me and this thing. And I was like, freak, bro, that's so awesome, man. Like, so you had that experience. Yeah, and he was like, yeah, dude, and you know what I did then? And I said, what? Tell me more. He's like, no, man, I just looked away and started praying to Jesus to remove these demons, man. Because he had this feeling in his head where it's definitely demonic forces. And they're trying to get into his mind. So he just prayed to Lord Jesus, move that. And yeah, that was the end of the story. Obviously, the aliens disappeared then as well. So they were like, probably like, oh, my guy. Like,
you phoned. He was looking up, asking questions. They're like, oh, hi. He's like, oh, no, leave me alone.
And that, again, I'm using that as an example, but that's fear. That's a fear-based response. Um, you only went to Jesus out of fear by pushing away, and that I said, by pushing away something, not willing to look at it fully because he didn't even give it enough chance or time. And it's because of beliefs that's imprinted for a long time, from churches, from even with people that maybe see other beings, from other realms or so. They start praying because it's demonic forces.
Yeah, it's funny how they don't assume it's an angel.
Yeah, it's always demonic forces. So,
And how funny, right? When you look about how many times precisely do you actually see, people actually encounter demons as
yes.
beings standing
And
beside
then
them?
angelic interactions. I mean, Mary, hello.
And angelic, and how many angelic interactions are there? There's like, off the top of my head, there's at least 15 angelic encounters, if it's not like 50.
Yeah.
Because it's a bit hard to remember now, but it must be at least 30 in the Bible.
Yeah.
And there's maybe 5 demonic encounters? Maybe.
Because obviously that unknown will cause fear, but then it's how you respond to it then.
But notice how what the angel says, the angel's opening line usually is what? Do not fear. They always open with that. Almost every time they open with "Don't be afraid." Now, why would you say that? Because the person you're talking to is waiting themselves.
Because it's unknown. It's not something that is of normality. Anything that's not normal will create fear and doubt within you. Like, but that's the things that will take you further.
Yeah.
I don't take psychedelics the devil, but I do experience fear. I haven't taken psychedelics for a long time. I think it's actually I need to yeah, definitely, man.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like so when I was in Bethel, I was with a friend on one of the vacations in Washington State, and we had this very revolutionary theological approach. Like, we were quite far out for Christians, let's just say, and we were very much open and prepared to experience things like angels. And the one night, talking about God and these sorts of things, and all of a sudden there was a presence in the room, and I knew it was of an angelic nature, or of a wasn't there to harm us. Let's just put it that way. It was really there to kind of assist what we were doing, or help, or it was but the fear and the terror we both experienced was beyond anything that I can describe. It was very intense. Like, we were both sitting on the couch, and within 5 seconds we were lying on the floor. And it was the whole atmosphere in the room changed, and it was quite scary. And then I looked at him and said, "Let's go closer." Because I was like, the only way that this is going to stop is once we get to, like, we have to push past this fear, right? Somehow I knew that was the answer. So we literally crawled on the living room floor, right? If someone walked in, it would have been very funny to watch, because we looked like we were severely drugged or injured. But we're like crawling on the floor towards this, where we can feel, both of us can, it's right there, it's standing right there. We literally crawled until we got to where I guess its feet would have been, and then all of the fear, all of the terror that we felt was gone, and we were like wrapped into this ecstatic spiritual download or something. And
yeah, because you pursued it, right?
But I can't help but thinking how many Christians, like, and other types of spiritual people, like, have that similar types of experiences, but freak out and think something
First
wrong.
is evasion.
Right, and how many times are people missing out on an encounter with something beautiful, something like the messenger of God, to put it in a heavy way. Like, how many times are Christians, out of fear of the devil, running away from angels that have messages and gifts for them?
Yeah.
And yes, it's supposed to be scary. It's supposed to be unknown. It's supposed to be challenging. Like, that's how you know it's the right thing. If you're just sliding in all lubricated, it's probably, this is not good.
Yeah, this is literally
Like,
guiding you into the cage. It's like, come here.
Yeah. Like, you're being lubed up to be stuck into a tube. Like, it's not. That's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be. You're supposed to fall on your face in fear. Like that's what. But just read the Bible, Christians, for the love of all things good and pure. Like, look what happens when angels show up. Look what happens when the Holy Spirit lands on somebody. Read the Bible. It's not a tea party in the backyard.
Yeah.
Like, and it's scary, right? It pushes us to our limits, but this is what's supposed to happen. This is how we grow. The angels come in part to challenge us so that we're capable of bearing the gifts that they come bearing, So don't send the gift bearers away because you're afraid of them.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, this was awesome, Johan. This episode was really. We jumped a lot, but I think it was. I don't think on this topic you can't. You can't. There's so many things. So yeah, overly going to the light side. It's very dangerous because you're not probably going to learn anything, and everything is going to be reaffirmed and confirmed how correct you are. And it's going to make you feel good up to a certain point, but that's basically a trap. Then external fixation. Am I missing anything? Unawareness. So that's
Unconscious avoidance.
Yeah, unconscious avoidance. And that comes back to your topic with regards to Hillsong Church. It's basically what's happened there. It's not looking at things as they are, because if you look at them as they are, it's painful. So avoidance of pain, because spirituality equals growth. The spiritual path equals growth, and growth equals pain. Just remember that. So if there's no pain or growth and you're a spiritual person, you're not. Like, and if you fit in everywhere like a chameleon and you're a spiritual person, you're not. You're probably wearing the clothes, but maybe some nice colorful clothes and stuff, but that's basically it, I think. Or at some point, yes, you can go into the deep dark crevices of your mind. You can come back and you actually really know you are like a light to insects. That's so it can't. It's not always bad, but most of the times it's not that case. If you look at teachers, Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi. Who else is there? So many people, but all of them had flocks of people just walking behind them. Wherever they went, people were just following, and some of them didn't even know why. They just had this feeling. That happens when you've actually really gone in deep. Based on my personal proof in my life, I haven't been there yet.
No. No, that's why I'm still pushing deeper.
Yes, and we have to keep on doing that. So yeah, it's not too far away now where I'm going to go on that silent retreat. So that's going to be interesting when I come back after that as well.
I'm so excited to hear about
Yeah,
that,
that's
dude.
going to be really interesting. And
That's
hopefully
awesome.
that'll be very transformative as well. And it's going to teach me a lot more things about myself.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will. And yeah, is there anything I left out? Just to summarize everything, we said evasion. Okay. So and we spoke about becoming a believer instead of an inquirer. That's very dangerous because
Yeah.
then you're following a certain set of rules, and each of us, we are individuals, so certain rules works for us and certain doesn't. So one man's gold can be another man's poison. Just remember that as well. So
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. And that's that the true faith is trusting God. That you'll get through. Like it says we do not walk by faith, but we do not walk by sight. We walk by faith, but not by sight.
Yes.
And then it says you will be a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. So you have God shows you one or two steps. A lamp to your feet is you only see about 2 or 3 steps in front of you. Faith is that you'll walk into the treacherous walk into the darkness. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. Your walk is through darkness, and your faith is that God will take you through the darkness. It's not to avoid the darkness. Your faith is what carries you through the darkness. Faith is the thing that you trust that walking through the darkness is where you need to go, and you follow that path. That's faith. Not just believing whatever your pastor tells you. That's not faith. That's stupidity.
Yes, that's so true what you're saying there, Norman. Yeah. So yeah, faith in our
Just bring that
Creator
little point.
and Him only.
Yeah, have faith in your Creator to take you, and have faith that He will complete the good work He has begun in you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what faith is. That's what faith is trusting that that He's still leading you on the path, even though it's dark and you can't see, and all you can see is just one step, and you're like, but I don't know where this step is going to take me. That's faith.
Yeah, I said
You don't need faith when the lights are on, bro.
yes, yeah. There's no
because you can see where
yes,
you're going.
exactly, right.
You need faith in the darkness.
But also, if you can do it through the darkness, you automatically do it through the light because you would have realized that.
Yes.
And then that you are walking with faith each 24 hours a day, and that's basically the point we want to all get at, because then you are not being guided by self or this fake you that you constructed to fit into society, because that's the other voices, if you didn't notice. You would be guided by the one that actually created you and the one that knows what your actual true path is, not the ones that's trying to explain to you why this path is so that's really powerful what you're saying. I need to go through, I want to read Yop again. I had this thought, so I'll probably go read that later tonight or so. But that book tells the story that we were talking about today, I think. Yeah, like
It does.
it's exactly what happened there and the end result and all the struggles this guy went through. Hopefully no one goes through that struggles again. But, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I think let's call it there. I think that was an awesome podcast. I think we're going to rock some people's worlds with that one.
Yeah. Okay. Johan, it was awesome, like always, talking to you, and we'll see each other again next week, right?
Yep.
Much love.